This is one of those stereotypical lockdown recordings. So this is the equivalent of having 4 musicians who are all playing a piece of music recorded independently, and I'm going to stitch them together. If you're doing a project like this, it's a little bit more complicated, but the way to save yourself a worry is really getting good instructions to the people that are doing the video and the performance before they record, because that's going to save you time in the edit. And what I did on this occasion, you'll see that it's the same person, but I asked the person to clap their hands a certain time frame before the very first note of the piece. And that's really useful because you'll see in a second where you can see our audio wave in the editor. I can see a nice big spike at the beginning of the piece, and then it goes down to silence. And what I'm going to do is line all of those up, which means that the music more or less is in time, and I only have to, by music I mean the 4 different parts, they're more or less in time as they're intended to be heard, and I just have to do some fine tuning on it. Whereas I've heard of a choir who were recording and they didn't have any means to do this, and some singers would intentionally, their part would not come in for 16 bars, but suddenly as an editor you're having to glue this all together, and it becomes hugely complicated. So if there's something as simple as asking everybody to clap their hands a certain time before it starts, that's really useful. And as well, if you were recording with 2 separate cameras on one setup, say a real life scenario with people playing, or if you were using a separate recording device, because not all video cameras have the best microphones, so you might be using a handheld audio recorder to get the better sound. What we can do as video editors is glue that all together, but we do need a bit of help to get it to go together well, and somebody clapping their hands on the video and audio is perfect because we can see very clearly that we can get all those spikes together, whereas when you're trying to blend audio together, there's a lot of variables such as how loud the instrument is and stuff like that make it very hard. But yeah, let's open up Shotcut again and we'll get going on this one. So here we go, and I'm going to do the it's come up again how it did the first time. You'll notice that export is still up on the left because it's remembered that we had export up last time we used it. So I'm just going to click it back to filters. Something that's worth thinking about on Shotcut and a lot of these platforms is that how you're viewing things is customizational, which is brilliant. But if you accidentally click something and it disappears, it can be mega frustrating because I've found myself searching for buttons and I can't get them back. So if you ever need to do that, there's a handy way to reset everything back to how it was. And if you're midway through a project, that's not resetting your actual edits. It's just resetting out where everything appears on the screen. So if you go to view and layout and restore default layout, you'll get back to how you recognized it when you first started, which is really, really useful. So we've got this here, and also when you launch it, it comes up with recent projects. So if I wanted to make some changes to that guitarist video that we were working on, I could easily get back to it. But I'm going to make a brand new one. I'm happy to work in the same folder for the sake of this, and I'm just going to call it flute. And I'm going to keep the settings the same because I'm confident this is good for my project. And I do know that my performer actually videoed in those settings as well. Most devices will, but if you did want to find out, you could go and find your parts on your computer before they come into the video editor. And I've labeled them in a way that makes sense to me. But also if I right click and go on properties, this is on a Windows computer, but there'll be something very similar on an Apple computer. And if you go to details up the top, it gives you a handy guide here to the width and the height of the frame. And where you see height is 1080, that's the 1080 that's referred to in HD. So this is perfect. But you will occasionally get somebody, especially if they're recording with a webcam or something, that it'll be 720, which is the next size down, which isn't a problem. It will probably be great quality for what it is. And you can still import that into a 1080 video project. But what I would say is if you were dealing with lots of different sizes, go with 1080. But if you were dealing with just one video and it was 720, maybe it's worth changing it to 720. So you're dealing with the same kind of size. And to do that, there's some options up here for 720 and yeah, but for 99% of cases, I'd stick to 1080p, 30 frames per second. So I'm going to click start to create my project. Oh, I've already made one with the exact same. I'm going to call it Flute 2. Here we go. Start my project. Oh, maybe it's because I'm saving it in a folder that's already got things going on in it. Sorry. Here we go. There we go. So I've got my project created. So what I'm going to do is get my first piece of video footage in. So I go up to the top again, open file. This time I'm going to navigate to my raw footage files for this piece. And I'm going to go in a kind of order that makes sense to me in the piece. So I've got them in order here. So open number 1, and it's showing me a display of my performer. And you can see there the claps going on, which is really useful. And I'm going to click and, oh, sorry, what I haven't done yet is make a video track on our timeline. So we need to do that first. Add a video track, and then click and drag the video in its entirety down to the bottom. I'm just going to plop it there for now and not worry too much about it. And what I'm going to do is get in all the video parts. And before I start any kind of editing for how it looks and sounds, I'm going to make sure they're all in time, because that's the kind of most important starting point. So let's repeat that process for all 3. So add another video track, click open, and I'm going to find video part 2. Here we go. To add to the confusion, it looks a bit similar because it's the same person, but that's not a problem because I've labeled them and I know that they are different videos. So I've dropped that there. I'm going to press save in between each one just in case, and then add a third video track. Open this one. Pop that down into video track 3. And then here's my final one. Okay, so now we've got all of our video tracks in, and we can have a look at them without really paying any attention to what we're seeing on the screen up here, which is our entire project. What we're actually seeing there is just video part 4, because that's at the top of the pile of the tracing paper. And we're going to be doing something where we can see all of our musicians in a second. But what I want to do is get those claps lined up. So in fact, it turns out I asked them to clap 4 times. So I've got 4 little spikes on every recording. So what I want to do is line these up. And what I can do is click and drag on each kind of block to do that. So I'm going to go up and get them roughly in place. But these won't be perfectly in place because we're viewing on the width of our screen. I'm seeing 30 seconds there, which is great when I'm navigating around, say, the guitarist, where we didn't have to do any fine tuning. But for this, I want to go right into the millisecond to be able to nudge it backwards and forwards. And to do that, there's this slider here, which is a zoom control, and it's a zoom control for the timeline. So it doesn't refer to what people see on the screen. We're not zooming into the image. We're zooming into what we can see down the bottom. And that's really important because when you make very minute changes, you want to zoom right in there, because your mouse, as you nudge it backwards and forwards, will move it a smaller increment. And then again, when you're dealing with the whole edit and doing things like putting titles on, it's too tricky to see what you're doing when you're zoomed in that close. So you want to be zoomed out nice and wide so you can see the whole of your timeline. So let's zoom in and get those things roughly in place. And I can just slide along on the bottom here to go back to the very beginning. And here we go. We can see our spikes now. They don't look quite as tall when we're zoomed in this much, but we can see much more accurately where they start. So I'm going to nudge this one to the right. And you'll see that they're not all going to be perfect because there's a lot to factor with. There's like a slight human error, the way that the video recorded. And so we're still going to have to use our ears and make fine changes. But this would be a far more complicated and frustrating challenge if we hadn't used this technique to get ourselves in the right ballpark. So I'm going to zoom back out and I'm going to play the video to hear if it's sounding good. But a word of warning, as we said, like we're only going to see the top person. And this one was recorded a lot louder, and we're hearing 4 different video files with audio on it at the very same time. So it's going to be far too loud, and it's going to sound potentially pretty distorted and horrible. But don't be put off by that. We're going to be changing that, but there's no point changing that until we've checked it's in time. This is just for checking that. So here we go. And then if we listen here, we'll hear this piece start. So that sounds roughly in place, but ideally we'd want to go in and make sure we're 100%, because you can change it once you've started working on it, but it's easier to do it at this stage. But for the argument's sake, this is all good to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim off those clapping bits at the beginning of our video, because those were a tool for us as video editors, but we don't want them anymore. We're not going to show those to the audience. So click on any of the videos. We're going to go down one by one. If you click once, it highlights the video you're working on to add the filters. But if you go to the end, your mouse turns into a double-headed arrow. And if you click and drag, you can kind of concertina away your video. And what that's doing is hiding that part of the video and removing it. But the good thing about it, I'm going to drop it there. So I've got rid of the claps, and there's still a split second before the piece starts. If I decided that was wrong, if I decided it was wrong immediately, I could press undo. But if I decided tomorrow I'm editing this and I suddenly realize, I concertinaed off a bit that was actually really vital, I can go back any time and concertina it back out. And again, that's what the non-destructive editing refers to. That data is always there and available to us, but by concertinaing it away, the audience doesn't see or hear it. So I'm going to do that for all of these, so they start roughly in the same place. And this isn't affecting how they're in sync to each other, because I'm just trimming the beginnings off. From this point onwards, I'm going to try and not move them individually, because then I'd lose the work we've done in lining them up. So there we go. Move them all the way back to the beginning. And now I'm going to do Control A, which is select all, because I want to pick up all of them at once and move them back to the beginning. So I'll click and drag them, and I move them to the beginning of the timeline. So now they'll all start at the very beginning. So if I press the rewind button, should be able to see them. So there's a bit of a pause there, and that's up to personal taste, but I always like it where there's a bit of a pause personally before the music starts, because maybe I'd want a logo up there or something as well. So I'm happy with them being in time. So now what we've got to do is, if you remember the kind of timeline I did for this wasn't a timeline, it was more of a visual diagram. I wanted there to be a musician in each corner of the screen. So I'm going to start working from video part 4, and I'm going to make video part 4 look roughly how I want it to be, and make some minor sound adjustments as well. And then we can do a clever thing where we copy that change to everybody else. So let's start going with 4. 4 is at the top of the part. See the changes we make here. So first of all, I'm going to add some filters to it. So I'm going to go to the plus, and I'm going to go and make a video filter. And what I want to do is I want to change the size and positioning of it. So there's one here that I think is called size and positioning. Here we go, size and position. Click that once, and it hasn't made any changes just yet, but it's brought our box up around the performer. So I'm going to concertina in from the side, or grab and move that, and you can see it's getting smaller, and it's actually displaying video part 3 underneath, because with the tracing paper analogy, we're now seeing what's lying beneath. If this was our only video, for instance, when we did the guitarist, it would be showing just a black screen there, because there was nothing else to show through. But we've got a few different musicians here. So that's roughly where I want it. I'm not going to be able to get this all completely accurate. So I click in the middle to move it, and I'm not adding any keyframes, because I'm not worrying about this flying around the screen. I just want to put it where I'm happy with it and leave it for the whole of the piece. So I've added where I want that one to be, but I'm going to add some audio effects at this stage as well. I'm going to go over to audio on the filters. I'm going to add a balance, because what we're doing here is doing a bit of an audio mix on it as well. video editing and video editing software allows you to do quite a lot in the terms of audio editing. But if you did want to go and do lots of effects and things like that, I would always recommend doing that in a audio editing piece of software, getting that audio edit and then tagging that on afterwards, because it is definitely easier to edit audio in a custom audio editing software. And there are some great free ones as well, just like Shotcut. But we're just making basic changes here. I'm going to change the volume, and I'm also going to just change the balance, because I thought it's quite nice to have we're going to put 2 performers on the left screen and 2 on the right. So I thought it's nice to have the ones on the left coming out of my left headphone a bit more. So by adding the balance, I've got this slider here. At the moment, it's on 50%, which is right in the middle. But I'm just going to slide it along to the left. I'm not going to go all the way, because if I did that, it would only come out of the left headphone. And this would sound quite artificial in my mind, but also somebody might have not a great mobile phone and be watching it, or their headphones might be damaged, and then they're only hearing half the performance. So I've decided to go, somewhere around 25%, but have an experiment with that. And then I'm going to add the a gain control, which is it's unusual in this editor that you have to add it, but basically we're adding a slider for the mixing desk for this audio part, so we can change how loud it is. In other audio editing platforms, video editing platforms rather, there may even be a mixing desk view where you can change this, but in Shotcut you do it like this. So we add a gain/volume control, and it's giving us a slider much like the balance control, but it goes from 0. And then if we go back to the left, it's going to make it quieter. And if we go further to the right, it's going to go louder. And I don't know if anyone's ever mixed or recorded audio before, but something to think about, which is really unusual, is that audio, when you're mixing it or recording it with a dedicated device, 0 is considered to be the absolute loudest and would be so loud it actually distorts the recording microphone or our speakers if we're playing it, and everything is measured as negative numbers beneath. And if you look on the right hand side of the screen, there's these 2 handy green lines that give an indication of how much audio is being pumped out of our project. And what we want to aim for is these to not really be peaking much above -10, maybe -5 at the absolute loudest, and to go down to somewhere around -18. So in this kind of window here, so you can see at the moment where I've paused it, it's all a bit too loud, which may have been contributing to it sounding all a bit crunchy and not that great. But the main reason to do this is because it will sound better on people's devices. If you had it going too loud, you might be able to push it right up to the 0 on your machine, but then when you export it, things like YouTube might be registering that as a distortion and things like that. So for best practice, bring it down a little bit. And if you're recording, say, a classical piece, your work might have a massive dynamic range. So beware that you set the levels for the loudest point so that it doesn't distort by the time everything gets going. If you're recording something like this piece is pretty much solid, the same level the whole way through, it's much easier to do. So, and actually you can do keyframes on the level as well. If you, for some reason, you wanted to like slowly creep the volume up of a certain instrument for a solo, you can get quite sophisticated. But again, if you're going really into depth with that, maybe audio editing software is better for that part. And then you can get that audio mix and just drop it in. So I'm going to just bring down the levels a little bit on this this video part 4, because I know that all of them are too loud. So I'm going to bring them down a little bit. And then when they're all done, we can go through and balance them finally. So I've added all the effects I want to this person at the moment. I've got them in the correct part of the screen. I've added the balance and I've brought down the volume. So instead of repeating that whole process again, what I can do, there's a little copy button down here on the bottom of the filters. I'm going to press this once and it copies all of those filters that I've added onto this video. So then if I go over to video track 3, I can press, I can see that it's got no filters at the moment. If I press this little clipboard, it'll paste the filters on and it's done the exact same filters to that video, which is great as a starting point because I don't have to go through them. And it's really useful if you're changing the size of things, because then you're guaranteed for it to be the exact same size, which is really useful. So I'm going to click and drag this one, because the downside is it's plonked it directly on top of my video track part 4. And I'm going to pop it just over there. And what I'm noticing already is that maybe I made them a bit too big because this person is overlaying that one. But I can go back and fix that. And I'm going to leave the balance as it was because they're on the left-hand side of the screen. What I might do is go back to video part 4, click on it once, and then move that up a little bit. But you could spend forever doing this, but do spend some time getting it accurately how you want it laid out. But for the sake of this one, I think I'm happy with that. So I'm going to go down to video part 2, and I'm going to repeat the process. I don't need to copy again because it still remembered what I did. So I'll just press paste, and then I'll drag this one over to the right-hand side. And what I'm going to do this time is click on balance, and I'm going to push the balance over to kind of 75%, which is coming out of the right speaker a bit more. And this time I'll copy those filters so that I've got that change that I did to the balance, and go down to our very final one, which is part 4, which is the one that's actually completely filling the screen behind, the only one that hasn't had the size changed. And I'll paste that in, and you'll see that it's gone there, and it's showing the black screen behind. So if you did this to one video, you will see what's behind. If there's nothing behind, you'll see just black screen. So now we've got those all in. I've just loosely placed them, but you can get them really accurately. And then let's have a look and listen, see how it feels. So it's not running that smoothly. I think that's because I'm on Zoom, but now I've told the video software to play 4 videos simultaneously, all with effects. So I am kind of pushing more stress on the computer. The computer should be able to handle it, but bear in mind that all these processes are going to add a little bit more. So sometimes it does take a split second when you press play. But that looks good to me. Ideally, I want to make some more changes and boost the level a bit more. I think I've gone a bit too quiet, but I'm happy with that for the sake of this example. And anything else that I wanted to do, just as we did before, I can absolutely do. So I can zoom out of our timeline down the bottom. Sorry, I zoomed in a little bit there. Zoom out, and I can zoom out way too much, which I don't want. Here we go. So that shows the whole of the piece. It's about 1 minute 50, I think. Oh, sorry, 2 minutes. So I'm going to add another video track, and I can just add. I'm going to add an image this time just to show how that works. And it could be really useful if you've already made a logo for your group. If you have a group that's doing something, or a poster, there's no reason why you have to recreate that in the video editing software. It should accept the images simply, and then we can just pop them on the screen. So let's add another video track, because even though it's just going to be still image, it's classified as video because it's something on the screen. And then I'm going to go to open file, and I've got this picture that I've got here that's associated to my performance perhaps. So I'm going to open that up, and it's displaying it as it was before when we were bringing in pieces of footage before. But because it's just a video, it's not moving at all. It's just simply there. And you can see that there's black sections on the side, and that's because this is a portrait photograph. So those black sections, if I add it to the top video in the timeline, which I'm going to do, we'll see through the tracing paper, and we'll see the video beneath, which could be what we want and could be what we don't want. But it's interesting to know it works like that. And that's if you ever get any video that's been videoed in an unusual way, like for some reason somebody sent you a video that they've span round, it'll be the same principle. But what you could do is use the size tool to rotate it if you wanted to change it. But I'm happy with this. I'm going to click and drag it down on our timeline, and I'm going to just pop it there. It automatically goes to just lasting 4 seconds long. But just like the video, when we concertinaed it to trim off the end, we can concertina this one to be as long or as short as we want, because it's just one stationary image. So I'm going to make it a little bit longer, and then I'm going to put the cursor there to see how it's viewing. So yeah, as we kind of imagined, it's just filling the middle section there, but we can do whatever we want with that. I'm going to pop it right at the end. So it just pops up there, which it doesn't make much sense with what it is. But if that was a poster, perhaps it would make sense. And if I wanted to do it in a bit more of a stylish way, but without the worry of all those keyframes, A good way to do it would be to add in a fade-in effect, just like we did for the audio with the guitarist. You can do that with images as well, or video with the thinking about the visual image. So here we go. If it's add a filter, go to video. Last time we did fade audio, but there'll be fade in and fade out for video. So I'm going to go fade in, and it's added the fade at the beginning, and it's added the time again. Just like before, I'm going to increase the fade a little bit. I'm going to put it up to 3 seconds there. And what I'm going to do, which is very precise to the fact that it's video, is that it fades from black, which is quite frustrating. We want it to fade from being see-through. So just make sure you tick this little box down here that says setting it to opaque mode. So then if we do that, we should see it will come in, but we can still see everybody performing beneath. But I'm pressing play, but it'll be a bit slow because we're adding even more things to it. So that could be a great technique if we wanted a logo up at the end or something like that. So I think that's all of the kind of, I know that's been quite fast paced, but those are the main tools you'll use